Okay, quick question. Have you ever been in a meeting or even just talking to your boss or like a coworker or colleague and you know you have a question or an idea, but you don't say anything? You just keep quiet, you let the meeting end, and you keep on pushing. Or maybe you're in a project and you see something is off, but you just don't push back. And then later you're sitting there thinking, why didn't I say that? Or worse, you see someone else say it and they get all this credit and all these accolades, and people keep just praising them. And you're like, why didn't I say it? If this has ever happened to you, you're not alone. And honestly, probably, yeah, probably not just about confidence. It might go way deeper, like back to how you were raised, how you were taught to behave, when to speak, when to stay quiet, or just how to survive in a room without upsetting anyone. So stick with me, because by the end of this video, we're going to see how your early wiring shows up at work, why it might be holding you back, and how you can actually start using the strengths it gave you to show up more clearly, attract aligned opportunities, and honestly, get more money. So for me, let me get comfortable. So for me, a lot of my wiring comes from growing up in a house where speaking up had a lot of consequences, negative consequences. And I want to say this early and clearly that my parents are not villains, and it's one of those things where they were acting in how they knew best. Um, and that's the most I can say. And what that looked like was a very rigid household. What that looked like was a household that rewarded staying silent. It rewarded not asking questions. It rewarded not talking back. It rewarded not just being silent and competent. And if you broke them, if you did question, if you did do anything that was outside of what was deemed appropriate and childlike or whatever, within those confines, then it was guaranteed that someone would get really angry, annoyed, or disappointed, which would then relay to insults and different forms of just mistreatment. So, what I learned as a kid, and if you went through something similar, what you might have learned as a kid is stay small, stay quiet, do the work yourself, and don't make anyone uncomfortable. Do not be a burden. So, when you fast forward to adulthood and your brain doesn't forget those rules, right? Those were the rules that helped you survive, that helped you go through your childhood with as little scarring as possible, even though you still got a lot of scarring. This shows up in the office, in meetings, in projects, in email threads, in your life. Like me, I notice that I don't always ask clarifying questions. I over prepare because I don't want anyone to think I'm incompetent. I keep interactions transactional. Like, what do you need? How can I get it done? Um, I don't speak up in a room if I am not 100% sure that I know the answer, right? Because I don't want anyone to quote unquote be mad at me or to think I'm incompetent. Because I do not see conversations in that space as a learning opportunity. I'm seeing it as a space not to get hurt. I'm seeing it as a space to show my competence so no one is yelling or screaming at me or anything in frustration. And I'm much older now, so you would think that has changed. And I will say, obviously, in the workplace, I'm a little bit better, but I do overcompensate. And then let's not even bring in the fact that, like, I am a woman, I am Black, I did come from lower socioeconomics. I'm always learning rules. So you bring all that together, plus the culture, it becomes a lot. So I don't say much, and then I leave the room or walk away from a conversation thinking that's just how it is. But really, my brain is protecting me, and that's not how it is. It's actually okay and encouraged for me to speak up now. And I've been unlearning the silence I was taught as a child. But I think just more and more as I get higher and higher in my career, as I get more visible in my career, the more some of the things that were deeply foundational for me are being surfaced. And I'm like, no, I cannot continue this way. I need to stop this. And I've gotten much better, right? In my years of working. And there's a lot I need to do. And if you're listening to this and you're like, oh my gosh, that's me too. Yeah, that's also me. It means you learned a very specific way to survive. And that survival mode is often labeled as professionalism or competence. People say things like, "Oh, you're so easy to work with," or you just get it done." And what they're really saying is, "Oh, you don't make anyone uncomfortable." And if you're Ghanaian or maybe West African, you might have heard the term managing. Pretty much what that means that you're managing everything yourself. You're not causing any trouble. You're not asking two questions. You're not doing too much to push back. You are listening, taking in, figuring out the problem, and then fixing it. You're not the person who's constantly pushing back. Now, there is some good in that because especially if you work in an environment that thrives in ambiguity, maybe you're the type of person who can pick up some cues and then solve a problem without too much back and forth. But ultimately, it's hurtful because it keeps you invisible. It keeps you as a worker bee and not as someone who's seen as innovative or a leader, right? And invisible is fine for safety, but we don't necessarily want to be safe. We want to grow. We want to get recognized. We want opportunities that actually light us up. We want a bank account that is growing and bursting at the seams. And there's so much conversation right now about elder daughter and all these different things. And it all seeps into this notion of the invisible rules that we followed or that we learned to stay quiet, to stay protected, and to move forward. And in some aspects too of people pleasing. And this shows up a lot if you grew up in cultures or households where hierarchy mattered, where elders aren't questioned, where respect often men don't push back. And if you're a woman, if you're a girl, that layer is real. You learn early that saying something wrong can have consequences, and then you take that wiring straight into work, and suddenly people are like, speak up, advocate for yourself, be visible. And if you're like me, you're sitting there and you're like, it's not that simple. Like intellectually, you understand why you need to speak up and the importance of speaking up, but in your body, like your muscle, it says the body keeps the score. I actually need to finish that book, but in that you're kind of held hostage because your brain literally learned the opposite of what people are telling you to do. It's telling you that you need to, in order for you to survive, not to be yelled at, not to be beaten, not to be insulted, you need to stay small. But then your environment is telling you no, in order to rise, in order to be who you want to be, you need to speak up. And I think I'm learning that there are so many different ways of unlearning this. And again, the higher I get in my career and the closer I get, I'm having a lot of conversations with C-suite and leadership. And because I feel very competent in my work, now I'm able to push back and learn. But I'm realizing that even in my personal relationships, sometimes I find it really, really challenging to push back, and I would rather withdraw. And that's not great. And I want to read this poem by Ijeoma Bingo. She wrote Questions for Ada, and it says, and I quote, "Sometimes we learn how." Let me redo that actually. "Sometimes we learn how to stop hurting ourselves because pain is not the only emotion worthy of our being." And I want to repeat that. Sometimes we learn how to stop hurting ourselves because pain is not the only emotion worthy of our being. Because pain is not the only emotion worthy of our being. That is so strong, right? Because when you silence yourself, it's a form of pain, it's a form of hurt. And what I, again, what I'm learning and what I'm unlearning is the idea of surviving as the goal. And I really want to move into thriving. And one of my deep beliefs too is that everything you learn in life helps you in wherever you're going next. So even if it was traumatic, even if it was sad, there's still a space to move forward. So if in that staying small and that anticipating needs so you don't get in trouble, you learned how to notice things, you learn how to adapt, you learn how to execute, you learn how to survive. And if you're anything like me, that probably means you're insanely competent in a ton of ways. And you get things done. You're known as a person who gets things done. You notice things that others miss. You can solve problems quickly and quietly with discretion. You have stacked skills. And some of them you might not even realize. And that's actually huge. That's the foundation most people don't even have, right? So, on some level, do I love my childhood and who I became because of it? Sometimes no. But do I also acknowledge that I have so much to give and I've learned so much because of it? Yes. And what I learned that has helped me and unlearn and grow is seeing, naming it, and starting to show what I've learned, who I am in a way that works for me. So if you learned all these different skills, if you stacked all these things, if you got really good at noticing things, if you got really good at executing, how do you then package that so you can get where you want to be and you can be a little bit freer? And that's exactly what I work on with my clients every day. We take the skills you've been quietly stacking, building, maybe because being quiet and keeping your head down was the safest thing to do, and we surface them. Because even if it was the safest thing to do back then, it's not the safest thing to do now to help you grow. So we get clear on what are you actually good at? What are your strengths? What is your value? And then we practice putting that into the world. That's meetings, conversations, opportunities, so that instead of staying invisible, aligned roles, promotions, collaborations, they start finding you. So if this resonates, and you've ever wondered, how do I start showing up without betraying who I am? How do I take the things I've quietly built and start using them? How do I break out of the mind the habit of saying, let me be small? That's what a clarity call is for. It's a space where we uncover what you're actually good at, what skills you've been stacking, and how to use them to attract opportunities that actually fit you without losing yourself in the process. So if you're ready for what's already there and you want to start putting that into action, that's what we do. That's what the call is for. But that's also what this channel is for. So if any of this resonated with you, if you want more skills, tips for just really having agency in your life and growing out of maybe whatever traumas your childhood brought and using those skills that it taught you to actually then create the life that you want, subscribe, and I will see you tomorrow.